So, yeah, there you have it. Satanism, the religion of the elite. And so why Satanism? It's not like they only disbelieve the Christian God, but that's the thing, is that the very reality that they are tying themselves to these forms, these words, Satanism, that is implicitly and explicitly biblical, Judeo-Christian heritage. That's where we're talking about these words that are in Hebrew, in Hebrew Bible, and we inherit them today. And so why hang on to these things? And it has to do with just with the essence of the term. This is like, I don't even think they understand this stuff. I don't think it's not like they went through the process of really thinking through, like, oh, we're Satanists, I think that it was, for them, it's all kind of like a game. It's all like a shock and awe deal, because, they don't believe in any of these things. It's a game of mockery. And that's where you got to look at it less as, people have to learn to look at this less as, this religion that believes some things and they all adhere to these beliefs, and they all kind of orchestrate themselves that way. They instead need to look at it as a religion that stands against and is opposed to the religion, and therefore takes on religion for the sake of religion, and thus they are the thing that is that the New Testament is prescribing against. That human life, the human spirit, is designed as such to not be bound and tied to these rites and rituals in order to achieve some, spiritual enlightenment or whatever. But that, we are truly spiritually enlightened the more free we are to acknowledge what is the truth, the truth about who we are, and to acknowledge the outline of the nature in whose nature we were created. So so the idea where people are looking for all these things, they're looking for, when people say, Satanism, Luciferianism, tying it to like magic traditions like Freemasonry and whatever, your Rosicrucians and all the Bill Cooper stuff. It's fine and good, but people are looking for all that stuff on the outside, and where they're hidden in plain sight, you're not allowed to really acknowledge them, because all of that's just coincidence. But when you have people's word, like this guy is the spokesperson for Satanism, what the Church of Satan is and represents, okay? And what he doesn't know or understand, I don't whether he is intentionally dishonest about this or not is irrelevant, because the whole principle behind what Satanism is opposed to what? Christianity. Well, what is it that Christianity is? Well, it's the belief that there is a God, and that God's name is Yahuwah, and that He sent a Son, His only begotten Son, whose name is Yeshua, to perform this act of forgiveness by offering His life in exchange for the lives of others, so that people could have a life filled with the rewards of knowing the truth and being free. And therefore, unbeknownst to these people who say, like, oh, they're free, it's all about freedom, and like they're truly free people, and they're a different species. She'll go on in that interview to say, oh, we're a different species because of the things that we choose to do and say and so forth, and believers in God and Christ or whatever are different species. It's all a lot of abstract. These are spiritual things you can't acknowledge that they're spiritual because they landlock the discussion to be like, no, it's just like this. You people are a bunch of idiots who are elites and know what we're doing and talking about, even though they don't even know. Like, you are intrinsically tying yourself to the Christian tradition and saying, as a way of saying that, there's an end to it. Those things are coming to an end. We're going into the age of Satanism, which he also says in that interview. Thousands of Satanists are going to come up in the 90s, and it's going to be this huge movement. There are, there have been a lot of Satanists, but still a marginally very, very small group of people. And they really target very ignorant people that have like a tenuous knowledge of Christianity, and most of what they know from Christianity and the theology of the New Testament they get from their local pastor people who have a certain idea about things, and as long as they can answer the arguments of their pastors, of their aunts and cousins and other family members, they found God and they get saved, and now they can quote all these Bible scriptures and be like, yeah, you gotta save yourself from hell, buddy, you better get baptized, do. And they'll have all kinds of interesting theological arguments and debates in order to, because they're trying to save their family, right? They're trying to save their family from hell. And so there's a lot of strength that people derive from Satanism and hanging on to this imagery and magic worship, and that's the magic of it, right? That's where the magic comes in. Why magic? Why are they just not like carte atheists? Why isn't it enough just to be like, I just don't believe this stuff, right? Why is that not enough? Why do we have to be like, oh, we're Satanists? Because they believe in the power of these forms, right? There's a verse in the Bible says that they acknowledge the form but deny the power. They take a form of godliness and deny the power. And so that's where I say, Satanism is religion for religion's sake. They don't believe that there's all these forces. They are the force. They are the God. They are God enforcing their rule and authority over earth by shocking you and scaring you into being afraid of them and giving them power, and that's what makes them elite. Not because they actually know anything or understand anything or have any more knowledge than anybody else, but just because by virtue of the fact that they can scare you. My camera's just not able to hang right now. Their power comes from the fact that they can just scare you into giving them power, and that's what makes them elite. Not that they have any actually real power. All they know is that they have the power to just scare you and frighten you and make you look over here, and that's what makes you sheep. And in that sense, that's where they're winning the war, is by we as sheep caving to the power of their fear and not really being able to recognize like where their power really lies, and that comes from where you are putting your energy. You're not able to see or recognize how they're behind, your food industry. You're not able to see or recognize how they work in the darkness and deceit. They're deceivers. Like their God is deceit. In the beginning, like you are of your father. Yeshua said to the Pharisees, says, you are of your father the devil. The world's first Satanists really are the people who were the enemies and the accuser of the chosen one of Israel, right? And it says you are of your father, the devil, the diabolos. So like Tim Mackey pointed out, the gospelers. It's just like, how are we gonna get this guy? We're gonna kill this guy. We gotta figure out a way to take him out. Your father, the devil, who was a liar from the beginning. And that's, Satanism, by pulling on Satanism, by attributing yourself like, oh, I'm a Satanist, what you're saying is you are of the tradition that uses the lies in order to divide and conquer and to rule over others and enslave them. And thus, in your sin, you are a slave then to sin. You are a slave to always functioning on that level, always having to come up with another deceit, always having to come up with another story, always having to come up with another angle, another way of of striving for more power. You've always got to, you can do whatever you want, and that's they always say, like, Satan sells you just enough of the truth to feed you a lie. Every amount of lie has just enough of the truth in it for you to believe it. People wouldn't believe it unless it had some semblance of truth in it. Some pattern they could recognize in what they're hearing in order to say, oh, that's the truth. And so then they accept all the other lies that come along with it, right? And so then it becomes a trick of blackmail. Even blackmail, oh, you bought this lie. Now you have to defend that lie to the very end. Because after all, you compromised on your conscience, and so there's no room for remorse or regret or repentance at all. You just have to bury yourself deeper in whatever amount of deceit in order to sustain this lifestyle, this way of being. And so you'll say anything, you'll be anything, you'll go up. You don't care. You can say, oh yeah, dude, I'm a Christian. You can be like, that's where a lot of Satanists become pastors of churches. I mean, there's all kinds of testimony out there of people that come out of the world. You want to know about satanic abuse, then listen to people who have been victims of satanic abuse. You're not going to get to the bottom of satanic abuse by just dismissing everybody who says that they're victims of satanic abuse out of the box. I mean, and that's that whole hypocrisy issue we're all facing right now. Is like, okay, you can say believe all women, but unless they bring up complaints against Satanism and the Church of Satan and satanic abuse, then it's, oh, we can't believe those people. They're trying to bring a problem against Satanism, which could only always be good, right? I mean, they're Satanists. Like, they wouldn't, sacrifice people. Like, come on, they're Satanists. Satanism, that's not even real, is it? A lot of people will dismiss it, like, out of hand. Like, oh, there's Satanism, Satanists. That's what they say about Christians. Their God. Like, God, Christians? What's a Christian? People believe this? Oh my God. Blah, blah, blah. They don't understand how the whole thing works. They don't understand that Satanism, it's not about Satan, it's not about worshiping Satan. Yeah, there's a couple of them. But Anton LaVeyan Satanism has nothing to do with worshiping some guy in a red costume and has horns and a tail. That's not Satanism. Satanism it's atheism, but with all the fringe benefits of esoteric occult knowledge and utilizing forms, ritual in order to conjure a response out of other people. It's the same like why liturgical worship is so effective, as you're seeing in this screen, is because that's what being spiritual being is like the most definite article of evidence that suggests that we are spiritual beings, is that we're so affected by forms of ritual, senses, sights, sounds, that they conjure ideas that we're able to associate and bring them and take them to heart. You sing the songs because as you sing the songs and they become a part of you, you associate your ideas with sentiments and feelings, and that then turns into an action in the lifestyle and the way that you approach your life. That's why I do music. That's what music is to me, is because I'm taking the power that there is in the sounds and sights of music and imagery in order to conjure ideas that I think are good ideas for me and for other people, which everybody's doing, but so when people will say, a big reason why I wanted to go over this is because I was watching this whole thing with this Satan guy or whatever, I don't know, something X, Nas X, and the whole music video and this whole, everybody wants to talk about it and everything, but people are like, I heard a talk show host say the other day, like, I don't think he's like a Satanist, because why would you, first of all, who is going to go out of their way to conjure the image and name and likeness of the manifestation in imagery, what is the spiritual being of Satan and all the ideas that come with it, of being an enemy, of being just against, of being a prosecutor or accuser that's always bringing a case against you, pointing their finger at you, and you better conform, you better bet, you better, that's what that whole music video is to me, is this guy who's totally caving on his conscience and wants to be like, sure, I will do anything for Satan, just to get a dime, I guess. I mean, whatever. But that is the essence of Satanism. It's not this, I believe in Satan and I think he's a good guy and God's actually the bad guy. Like Eddie Murphy quotes Sammy Davis Jr. as saying that, Satan's actually a good guy, dude. He has more power over God and stuff. And while there are all those people, you don't need to hold those kinds of beliefs. It's just the forms. The forms of, I'm going to take action and make choices that are going to be deceptive, and I'm going to use that deception in order to create more deception, and I'm going to use that deception in order to create more deceivers who will create more deception, so that I will have more power, people will be more divided and weaker, and they will be more subject to what I want them to do and say and be. Because I want the world to be a certain way, and if it isn't, I'm going to make it be that way. And I will beg, borrow, and steal in order to make that happen. I will kill, I will slander, I will do anything in order to get more power. And that's where all these things kind of come into line. The elitism, why Satanism is the original religion of the elites, on their own confession. The dude says, Satanism is a religion for the elite. Therefore, why are we so easy to excuse the elite for some some common sentiment that we have that no, nobody can ever actually be a Satanist. No, they actively go after Satan, the people with talent. They talk about in that interview, and it's also been in others where why, you see Anton LaVey with John Kerry back in the day, having a relationship with Marilyn Monroe. Sammy Davis Jr. and all these prominent people. It's the same thing with Church of Scientology, who go after celebrities in order to legitimize what they're doing. Because it's about control, it's about power, it's about a few people getting a hair and deciding hey, this is a pretty good scam. I think this is going to work out for us. We should do this, we should do that. And in order to set ourselves up, we'll be sitting pretty at the expense of everybody else, giving everybody else the finger, right? Well, why is that a problem, right? Why is that bad? Are they bad people? At the end of the day, isn't it just kind of silly, this God thing? There was a friend I spoke to recently, and he was why can't we just grow up when it comes to Bible and believing in God and believing in Jesus? Sounds grow up, right? And I understand what he's saying. The problem is what truly is the way? When Jesus says, "I am the way, the truth, and the life," through me, what is it he's trying to say there? What is it that makes him the way? What is the thing that makes him the life? Is it because he said so in the Bible? And he did some really awesome things? Or is he trying to tell us who he really is? Is he trying to tell us, if you want to think about me, don't think about, a Jewish first century man who was a builder and grew up in a tense political environment. I think he's saying that when you think of me, think of what is the way to life and truth, the way, the truth, and the life. What makes him the way? Well, what makes him the way is that there's only one way to go, and that's just to be who you are. And who you are is, so that's why you see later in John chapter 17 how he outlines this big theological map of who he is and who we are. Father, I pray that they may be one, even as we are one. As you are in me, I in them, they in us. One. And that's pulling directly from the Shema. Shema Israel, Yehovah Eloheinu, Yehovah Echad, Yehovah Elohim, Yehovah Echad. Hear, O Israel, hear and obey, O Israel. I am that I am, who was, who is, who shall be. Hear, O one who wrestles with God, who's trying to figure God out. Hear and obey, one who hears and obeys. Hear and obey, I am, who was, who is, who shall be. The Almighty, Elohim, who's the mighty authority, ruler, creator of the heavens and the earth. Who was, who is, who shall be. Echad, a one bundle of grapes. It's called a bundle of grapes. Echad, and bundle of grapes. The density of these of pockets of information, the whole thing comes together, and the vine that branches out into these grapes and becomes fruit. That is Yehovah Echad. Yehovah Elohim is the one who branches out and becomes dynamic, interfaces with a reality that he creates. And we have that power. And so that's where, Satanism is drawing on that truth and then tries to get the corner on the market on that, and then turn around and accuse the market giver, the one who has the capital. The one who has the capital on who you are and what you're capable of as a free divine being with the powers of all the creation of the universe, to choose one way or another, to choose life or death. They're going to say, oh, we've got the corner on that market, and you are a scumbag, if you don't do things our way and see things our way, and even though, we got our name from you guys, the reason we are Satanists is because there's this Satan is a Bible character in the Bible of Christians. They don't say that they're, whatever Hindu devil, that cult or whatever. They're distinctly against the Western cult because that's their, that's their cultural environment. That's where they come up. That's what they grow up in. It's where they're birthed out of. It's just an antithesis to the thesis of what is Western Christianity. And it's hard to hold too much against them because of how much Western Christianity has been distorted, and the power that has animated Western Christianity in the modern age. What do we got here? Bulls are just cows on ketamine. Right? You could say that. Or you could say that bulls are male heifers. What would be what's the proper nomenclature for that? Steel Pantera, thanks for the comment. It's stopping by here in Twitch. Kind of making my way around here. So if we're going to recognize Satanism for what it really is, we have to look in the right places. Just like we have to recognize, like, if we're going to believe Satanism, we have to know where it comes from. And if we're going to know where it comes from, we got to understand Christianity's thesis. What is the thesis to the antithesis? Is it really Christianity? Is it really the teachings of the New Testament? Is it really is it really an antithesis to the Gospels? Or is it an antithesis to something else? And I would argue that it's kind of both. On the one hand, it's the antithesis to the Gospels, because, whatever it is the Gospels are going to posit to them, by and large, people are not really happy with what they end up with. 20th century, we're with birth. By and large, whatever the real underlying thing is behind Christianity, even if everybody has it wrong here today, all the churches are wrong. Everything about it is just wrong. What we do have, good or bad, is not worth it enough to these people to, find something that they want to group themselves in. Which is fine. But free choice, right? I'm not a Calvinist. They have the freedom to choose, what they're going to be a part of. What they don't have the freedom in is the truth about what the teaching is, and that's the thing that's of ongoing debate within Christian circles, right? What is the power that the gospel has over? Satanism is that's the thing that's of ongoing debate. What I would say, where the win is and where the loss is that Satanism and Luciferianism and magic and stuff, what it fails to understand is the universal oneness of who the God of the New Testament is. And they do that because they they do that because they largely inherit what is a huge misunderstanding about what the New Testament teaches. Pastors have inherited their own lies, and that is largely what generated the antithesis. So people don't understand the gospel, they don't know how to communicate it, they don't know how to transmit it on down to the next generation. They don't understand the teachings of Yeshua, Mashiach, and the apostles who sent them. And because they haven't understand that, after 2,000 years, it became a telephone. Well, then you end up with Satan. However, Satanism holds on to its own line of tradition, which has intentionally set itself up in opposition to what the gospel is, that it's teaching. And that's a tricky one right there. Magicism comes largely from this thread of ritual that has kind of existed always under the surface of common consciousness, of collective consciousness. But that's where there's this really awesome interview. Maybe I can dig it up here.
Last week, and today we are going to show you the results of our first Magic Wars investigative report. And we're going to show you a little bit right now what we found when we got there. And first of all, the Purple Man, the infamous Purple Man, nowhere to be found. Wasn't there.
The purple shirt is in honor of his notable lack of appearance. Exactly.
The only purple in this story is my shirt today. But anyway, we were always a little bit suspicious to begin with because it seemed a little strange to us. Thelemites mentioned these in OTO and that they're in OTA, and it seemed kind of odd. Thelemites that were libertarian oriented or supporters of the Republic and these sort of things. It didn't make a whole lot of sense. But we thought we'd go and investigate anyway and see what we'd find. And wow, didn't disappoint. What we found was not at all what was purported to have been there. At least Purple Man was not to be found. Instead, he sent a couple of other ladies, and we're going to show you the ritual that they actually did. Tell us a little bit more about what you're doing out here.
BJ invited us. He is here in spirit. We are actually here today to reawaken the feminine divine. We are here to invoke Babylon and return her to her throne and hopefully overthrow this. I come before thee. Oh, that is the deepest depths of existence. Guardian of the seven great principles held within your will. Goddess of Hecate laid before the people within the mysteries of the blackness. Seen as the golden by your true seekers, I give myself all that I am to you, great Babylon. I lay before you all that is within me. I harness my animal as you ride the great beast so that I might serve you with my spirit. Oh, goddess of the gateway of death of life, all that is brought forth from the mysteries beyond the knowing.
This guy's hilarious, isn't he? I like dabbing. Five. Dude, the soundscape stuff. You know, if you're freaked out by this, you know, I understand why you would be, but
So have you ever seen a magic ritual before?
No.
Was it scary?
Yeah.
Really? You thought it was what was scary about it?
Like, when, how they saying it?
Really? Yeah. Oh, I see. Interesting, very interesting. Well, thank you for your opinion. Hi, I'm asking for opinions today on the magic ritual that you just witnessed. Would anyone care to make a comment? It looks satanic. It looks satanic. It looked like a satanic ritual. What made it look satanic to you? The language. It looks satanic. I'm sorry.
So there you have what Leslie and I found. This is what was waiting for us in Hollywood, and you heard what people around the ritual had to say about it when Leslie asked them about it. Let's now find out what an expert has to say about it. We have here tonight with us Leo Zagami, who is a specialist in Satanism in Hollywood, who in fact just finished publishing this new book,
I think I've probably
The
covered this
Decline
before.
of the Western Initiatic System
it's so
and
good to
the rise of Satanism in our society. So, Leo, welcome. Welcome to Magic Wars.
And actually, I'm glad to see for the first time my book because it's printed in the US, so I'm going to have to wait another
this is
few-
the first time you're
It
seeing
arrived.
this?
It arrived yesterday.
Yeah, here, have a look.
It seems like a big top.
Yeah, it's very nice. It's very crisp. Very crisp.
Thank you for that. I mean, I'm sure that when you see your own books, it's like having your own. It's a big.
It's like you're seeing a new baby for the first time on the show. Wonderful.
Right.
Oh, that's lovely.
Glad that you pointed out on the Hollywood subject, though. I mean, of course, it's one of the subjects that occurs in this book because this book is based on the decline of our society, which reflects the decline behind the scenes of the secret societies, which have been influenced in negative ways. Of course, we can agree on some things, disagree on others, but I was very grateful because you gave me this interview for my book, and you did it without really knowing me prior to that. So I'm glad that you and also Mark Stavish agreed to participate at this last-minute interview that we included in a book that, as you know, has been promoted on InfoWars, and it's part of my work. In Italy, I published also a book 3 years ago dedicated to Hollywood and also the music side of the Illuminati. So a specific book that hopefully I will bring out in the next couple of years also in the English language. But I must say that Definitely, we have been foreseeing what was going on in Hollywood, especially since in 2013. Maybe this is not known to you, but there was an attempt to promote the Ordo Templi Orientis as the new Scientology in Hollywood. Oh. And one of the spokespersons that was coming out, even with a tattoo of the OTO on her arm, was Peaches Geldof, who died a year after promoting herself openly as a member of the Ordo Templi Orientis and as a sustainer of the cult of Thelema and Aleister Crowley. So not many people say that because, of course, Peaches Geldof, daughter of Bob Geldof, which is this immense figure, especially in the UK, where he's also has been granted an aristocratic.
Ordo Templi Orientis. Okay, Ordo Templi Orientis. That's what he said. So write that down, kids. Taking notes.
Socratic title by the Queen. It's not very polite to criticize a figure like Geldof, but Peaches died because of something that accumulates a lot of these people involved in black magic, in the cult of Thelema especially, which is heroin, the abuse of heroin, of drugs, which was also known to have affected Aleister Crowley. Now, many historians from the OTO tend to defend Crowley, saying that he became an heroin addict because he had a subscription to a medicine, and this medicine basically was heroin-based, and then he became an addict to it. At that time, let's remember that both heroin and cocaine were prescribed by doctors. But I can tell you that Crowley's use and abuse of the drug was far beyond the medicine thing, and actually
So, if you're having a hard time understanding what he's saying Crowley, he's talking about Aleister Crowley, was addicted to heroin.
There is one thing that not many people know, and it's actually the OTO doesn't want you to know, and they don't want, of course, the world to know, that when Crowley died, they found a needle under his bed. He was injecting heroin up until the end of his life. So this is something they tend to kind of keep on the side because they tend to glorify Crowley. Also, there's been for years this thing about Crowley not sacrificing human beings, but sacrificing his own sperm. And of course, in Italy, we have a joke. I learned it when I was a little kid. There was this joke, was like this. A guy masturbates into a balloon. He throws the balloon in the air and says, "My son died in the Air Force." Right. This is what they want us to believe about Crowley's details in the book Magic in Theory and Practice, where he actually says it very clearly. His favorite sacrifice is the human sacrifice, the blood sacrifice. Then, of course, everything else is a substitution. It can be the incense of the magic of Abramelino. It can be something else that you can symbolically, substitute. But for receiving that energy, he says, of course, you sacrifice animals and you sacrifice humans. So Crowley has been, in the last 20 years especially, since the Ordo Templi Orientis is trying to promote him in a different way amongst the New Agers. And the New Age, of course, is made of people that don't have such a hard stomach for black magic. When it's, in the end, they had to tone down the figure of Crowley publicly through the media. And you can go on Google and see that there is over and over again people defending Crowley, saying, no, he didn't do human sacrifices, he was only talking about masturbation and blah, blah, blah. So this kind of going back and changing history is typical of people that are powerful, influential, and want to write their own version of history. It happened on many other subjects, of course.
Right, and it's not just the members of the OTO who are trying to gloss over the heroin addiction. If you watch the cultural programming that is coming out in the new television programs.
Supernatural, for example.
No. Specifically, Sensate. There's a program called Sensate where they feature a heroin addict prominently as one of the heroes.
Right.
I'm seeing this more and more frequently, where people with heroin addiction are seen as natural, normal members of society, going about their lives. They just, excuse me, I have to go into the bathroom and shoot up now because it's 10:15. And I think that we're seeing this normalization of the heroin addict in popular media as a part of this desensitization to the topic that wants to make Crowley more palatable.
And it's the same thing with the pedophilia, no? They are trying to lock the politician and change the public perspective about pedophilia to make it more acceptable, because now everybody's being exposed, and in the end they want to save the day. 11 years ago in Italy, the Grand Master of the Ordo Templi Orientis, the representative, of course, of William Breeze and Bill Hedrick, and the guys who have in their hands the OTO, which is this triad, Romano Duquette, Bill Hedrick, and William Breeze, the representative was called Alberto Moscato. Alberto Moscato, I met him several times, was a particular kind of character because he was a military. He was himself in the Guardia di Finanza, which is a police force. He was in charge of busting pedophilia on the internet. And at the same time, he was shooting heroin. And he died of an overdose.
Wow.
Of course, the Ordo Templi Orientis had to keep this one also very secret. So as you can see, this theme seems to repeat itself. And when it repeats itself, it means that, like Leslie was saying, there must be some kind of, also normalization phase where heroin addicts are brought into society as acceptable.
Right. Also they presented a very sort of positive image of Crowley on the television series Supernatural, where they made Crowley the king of hell after Lucifer was deposed. And they presented him as a sort of a comical, jovial figure. Certainly not, but they actually chose an actor who looked something like Aleister Crowley, so I don't think this is an accident.
Hello, boys. Pleasure, etc. It's Crowley, right?
Crowley.
You're Crowley.
Crowley.
I'm Crowley. I run hell. Was a punk-ass crossroads demon. Now, king of hell.
No, it seems as though they're purposefully trying to whitewash and rewrite who Crowley was in his personal life and not just his spiritual life, in order to make him a more sympathetic person, which he clearly is not. None of us would ever take advice from a full-blown heroin addict who is known to bugger little boys. We just wouldn't. And yet these are the type of people.
The defense that they try to defend Crowley also about the subject of pedophilia. They say, no, Crowley was against. The Lema says that you have to condemn those who take the will of other people, and so also the will of little boys. Well, to these people, I would like to remind them that the experience of Aleister Crowley in the Abbey of Cefalù for 4 years was anything but protecting the little children. Often they participated to these sexually deviant rituals. In one of the rituals, Leah Herzig was made to be having sex with a goat, and the goat was chopped off the moment of ejaculation. I mean, we're talking about some really sick stuff going on in the
Wow.
And there was, for all, I mean, this abbey now is a relic, but still with Kenneth Anger went there in the 50s, he managed to scrape off the walls that now are in very bad state, and to see these images that were very provocatory for that time. I mean, we're talking about satanic brain full of cocaine. One of the things that appears as a phrase is cocaine. So drugs are definitely part of Crowleyanity. Of course, if you go into this booklet that I have here and that nobody has, which is the as you can see, Ordo Templi Orientis handbook of the lodge master, basically of the people who are in charge of their camps, of their oases. They have different things because, as you know, when they have less members, they are chartered as a camp, then an oasis, and then a lodge. Well, in this handbook, we find material which is very interesting on how they keep the secrecy of their members, of their practices. And of course, I also had this myself when I was myself in the Ordo Templi Orientis. They tend to push the card of the honest people when they show to their Minervals that they don't do drugs, that is strictly forbidden in their meetings, and blah, blah, blah. Of course, once you go up the ladder in the upper degrees, where you are signing also non-disclosure agreements, because many people don't know this, but it's also written in the handbook that they sign non-disclosure agreements in the upper degrees. At this point, what happens? They get involved in things. I wasn't in the OTO myself for that long before I started wandering into all sorts of deviant situations that were around me. And I really saw that it was clear to me, like for also others around me, that simply they don't want the police or the authorities to not know they were, the certain things were done. So you have to maintain an image in front of the public.
All right, that was a really important point. I just wanted to stop Conan on that, because when it comes to people that are twisted and psychotic, criminals, they're doing the worst things you can imagine. They're not gonna go on your front door, go door to door, and be like, "Hey guys, just so you know, we're cannibal pedophiles over here, and boy, we love sacrificing goats and children, and so if that makes you uncomfortable, we're real sorry, but just thought we'd let you know." No, they're not going to do that. They're not going to go out of their way and be like, "Yeah, that's me. I'm a guy that does that kind of stuff," because they know it's sick and it's wrong. That's the thing, is that there's that shared thread of conscience that people can recognize intuitively, that when you do things that are destructive, that's destructive behavior. When you destroy something, that's not going to result in a net, growth of good things. So, so they got to keep the stuff secret and hidden, because, they're just so elite, and, you simple little people wouldn't understand. But, if you were in my place, then, you would, and you would be doing just what I'm doing. You're no different about it than me. And it's just this, constant juxtaposition of just, who are you? I'm me. You. Who cares? If I get away with it, then I get away with it. It's about getting away with it, because I don't care if they get caught. At the end of the day, they think they can lawyer their way out of it, and that's what you see doing. Because that's why so many of them are lawyers, so they can lawyer their way out of this horrendous behavior. And you're not going to be able to afford the lawyer, and so they're just going to get away with it anyways. And a large part, many of them have, But, a day is 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is a day with the Lord. So, where people think that they've gotten away with it for generations, well, generations pass, and it catches up to them. And that's where a lot of these, that's the deal with royalty, and how that was the way royalty functioned, and it always backfired on them, and Marie Antoinette's and so forth. And, that's the big deal about the age that we're in. We lived 250 years after the American Revolution. This is the most revolutionary idea ever to, that is the fruit of these spiritual things that were the literal seed that was in the ground in Jesus of Nazareth. When his seed went in the ground, his life went in the ground. What it came up as, fast forward, 1,700 years to the American Revolution. That's the fruit of that idea to this day. The most obviously revolutionary nation state to ever emerge out of the mind of man. And to this day, it's also the most brought more people out of poverty. You actually have a middle class. There was never a middle class before. There was a servant peasant class and the upper class. That's the elitism. That's the thread of tradition that kind of goes back to these few people that have a lot of power, and they've got all the special knowledge because they can get all the right, like, little philosopher teachers that, they're inaugurated in this ancient, secret tradition that, those little secrets never went away, and that's the stuff that you're going to need to know if you're going to, rule over all the masses. Yeah? Can I help you? What's going on? Oh. Well, there's to take care of her with a right? So yeah, that's the elitism of the royalty and stuff. What America did was it recognized the power in the citizenry to take care of themselves, and that really when royalty and elites get involved, they just tend to muck things up, and when they tend to overreach on their power, that's a sure sign that they're on the tail end of their power, because absolute power corrupts absolutely. And when you don't understand the energies of the universe, and you're not able to recognize where the true power really lies, being, in the humble servant of a man, giving up of his life for the sake of many. You were failing to recognize how that is the energy that operates all of reality, down to the smallest seed that goes into the ground that you plant your crops in order to harvest, and that gathers rain. And you can actually physically manipulate an entire landscape that way. The Sahara Desert used to be not a desert, but lots of farmland that went away because they didn't take care of the land the right way. They didn't recognize the energies. They didn't recognize the energetic flow of reality, that when you tend to these things, you don't when you preserve the life that's in a thing, that's the way that you can have a rich, abundant life, rather than when you just exhaust everything and drive it to the absolute point of extinction where it can never come back. It never comes back, and then you say to yourself, what the heck happened? I used to be the greatest superpower in the world. Oh, Rome, flying on the wings of eagles. And then you overstretch yourself because, you're operating in a capacity that is contrary to the nature of reality. So, really important.
That was being, against pedophilia, against Satanism, against drugs, against everything that is negative. But then, of course, when you go with them behind the closed doors, everything that they were publicly against, it was practice. Wow. This is so. Of course, Satanists, and you said it yourself once in private to me, David, are liars. You wrote that to me, and I agree fully. So you can never really trust a Satanist in what they say.
The problem is that a goodly number of Satanists consider misdirection to be a virtue, the ability to misdirect. I mean, it's kind of like in Islam, or Orthodox Islam, where they consider taqiyya, or lying to infidels, to be actually a virtue. So it's similar.
Even some branches of Islam where having anal intercourse is considered a positive thing to avoid losing the virginity.
By the way, you've opened my eyes a lot. I never really understood so many things about OTO until I met you, and I began to hear these things. And Leslie mentioned to me something today that I think should be alarming in itself, and that is that OTO today has a caliphate. A caliphate.
Yes.
It is a caliphate. Like who? Like ISIS tried to set up.
The use of the word caliphate that McMurtry, the first caliph, who was Imenos Alpha, because then after his death was followed up by William Breeze, he actually went around at the end of his life with a turban. And I mean, when you go into the Minerval degree, you are greeted by what is supposed to be a Muslim inside the tent. I don't know if you ever read the Rituals of the Ordo Templi Orientis, but the first figure that you meet, you encounter, is supposed to be somebody from the Ashashin sect, some say, but then it becomes more clear when you go into the tent, and he says that he's Saladin. Saladin was a very important, as you know, warrior of Muslim faith.
Right.
So basically here you are engaging in an heresy of Islam, in an Islamic heresy. I described this very well in this book that you showed me, which is my book, my latest book. Suggest you go and check after the last chapter of this book. In the last chapter of this book, I show, by the way, also for the first time, a photo of Baphomet, which is Muhammad on the cross. Yeah, maybe you have it there on that page, I think, or the page, one of the last images, the last photos.
This one?
Yes, that's it. That is basically, that is, I will tell you what that is at. Go under Crowley. You see under Crowley is another image. Up, move up a second. There, cross there. That cross represents basically...
Oh, the cross. Okay,
sorry. Found in the 1950s in a Templar church in Turkey. Okay. And it's an incredible discovery because it's a cross with Muhammad on top of it. And this is said to be the original Baphomet. Wow, so we are talking basically about an interpretation that for many centuries, for about 2 centuries, has been the speculation of most Masons, the fact that Baphomet was or not Muhammad. There's been all sorts of books about it. And then some said it means Sophia, means this, and means that. Baphomet can mean many things, as you know, in the occult world. But specifically in regards to the Knights Templars, this discovery which I show you there, which is not shown in any publication, it's basically the Baphomet which demonstrates that a faction of the Knights Templars at that time had secretly converted to an heretical branch of Islam, or Shiite Islam, I think, by the way. So what does this mean? It means that at the end, the Knights Templars, I talk about this in my book, so then people understand also better historically the context in which it came the demise of the order, and of course Jacques de Molay and everything else. This was a mega order. This was a big order spread all over Europe. At that time, you didn't have immediate contact between the different churches, the different commanders. So for many years, you would be isolated from one one church, the one monastery to the other. It took even a year, maybe, for a guy with a horse to go and communicate one thing. And in between these periods, certain heresies could grow within the monks, maybe based in an Islamic territory. And so it's true that there was this situation with the Baphomet Mohammed within the Knights Templars, and it's true that certain heresies, dangerous heresies, had started to involve more and more Knights Templars. I mean, some believed in the occult, others believed in Islam, some believed in both. But as I said, in my writing, I explained also as an historian, it is very possible to say today that a minority, of course, was probably doing these practices. But as you know, there only needs to be one lodge or a minority to ruin the show for everybody else. At that point, of course, the King of France, who wanted to take over the order, to take the riches and everything, had an easy go because part of the order was doing homosexual, magical rituals and stuff, others Islamic. Even today, I noticed this myself, being a journalist, investigative journalist. I think 10 or 11 years ago, a priest called me up from the Cistercian order. Do you know the Cistercian order is the one that created the Knights Templar? So as a Knights Templar, because I am myself a Grand Prior and Grand Master of a Knights Templar order, he called me up and he said, Leo, we need your help. And so I went to this church. It's a very important church in Rome. The first church is the Church of Santa Cruz in Jerusalem. So that basically used to be the villa of the mother of Constantine, where they are said to be kept these pieces of the cross. Mm-hmm. And so what happened there? This guy called me and said they are trying to build a dossier so they can incriminate the head of our order and kick us out of this church. Can you, as a journalist, help us writing also an open letter and a message to the Pope to save our order from this? Well, we called the journalists. We had a secret meeting. Then some journalists also came from Italian journalists came, a very important journalist from the quotidiano, the newspaper Il Tempo. Mm-hmm. Then I called also journalists from Norway. We interviewed this priest, went in the various newspapers, blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. The Italian one was made in a more reserved manner in the sense that he didn't disclose his identity, while instead in Norway he did, even with a photo on this magazine. But in the end, the Pope didn't change his idea, and they were all kicked out, basically because they had to make money, because there was a jubileum coming up, there was some projects, there was a jubileum in the year 2000, which had created a lot of debts in that church, about 2 or 3 million, maybe even more. And so they had the perfect excuse, together with the fact that the head of the order was involved with some little kids and blah, 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 as usual, to kick them all out. So if they do these things today, they of course did these things at the time of the Knights Templars and their demise. So I mean, it's not like a new technique that they brought up. So we find ourselves now in front, of course, of a corrupt Catholic Church, but we also find ourselves in front of a satanic reality in Hollywood, which is about, I think, to be exposed further. I would like your viewers to go and check out a film in particular that came out a few years ago. It was a film of Kubrick. It was Lolita, the famous Lolita movie, no? Based on a specific book by a Russian writer. Now, the subject of the Lolita, the young girl, is a subject that in Hollywood is always been touched in a way, even publicly, but in a suffused way. Even Charlie Temple was part of this disclosure of pedophilia in Hollywood.
Right, and this is very actual today because we've had this last week. What is his name?
Corey Feldman.
Corey Feldman, right, who has come out and began talking about this, and he's been arrested and all kinds of things. They did a drug raid on his home, and ever since he began to talk about these things.
Well, regarding Corey Feldman, he participated, I'm trying to get the name of the movie, I don't know if you remember, he did a movie in the middle of the 80s, a movie about vampires. Yes. Together with Corey Feldman, there was also Corey Haim, the guy who died 38 years old a few years back, who Corey Feldman says was raped at 11 years old. Wow. This movie is particular because you see this movie has also some kind of secret messages. I'm sure that Leslie...
The Lost Boys was so important to my generation. Right. That came out when I was in high school. And we were all very powerfully moved by it.
I mean, how is the name? The Lost
Boys.
The Lost. That's it. I mean, you only need to see what happens with this movie, which basically is a movie in which they arrive in this town. They get said, the guy, I remember, was watching these comic strips and says, no, you have to buy this other comic strip. And this comic strip was actually a manual to understand about vampires who were living in that town. I mean,
and that goes along with the whole
kind of symbolic of this whole thing.
It's about hiding it, but
vampires
it's both and, you know, like
the same thing.
Is there abuse of children in this way? And then they show you them abusing children on the camera, and then they broadcast it to you, and you're like, Is this abuse of children? I don't think so. Really? Are you going to try and say that I'm a child abuser as I abuse a child on a screen? You know, like, that's the, you know, there's the arrogance there, the elitism of, we're tired of these idiots telling us how the world is supposed to be with their arcane, you know, superstitions and so forth. We have the true knowledge, the true power of reality, and it's in our material, you know, will over reality to make it the way that we think that it should be. And you know, you peasants, you peons, you know, then you're just gonna have to deal with it because you just don't know better. You're just an idiot. You're just a sheep, and we are going to be your, you know, beneficent, maleficent shepherds.
Pedophiles are psychic vampires, and they are even more than only psychic vampires.
Right. Well, you know, and the things that we've been hearing about, you know, on InfoWars, and things about ritual murders and these sort of things. And didn't you have some sort of occult murders in Italy once, the Monster of Florence or something like that?
Yeah, well, I mean, I wrote about it, and actually I'm about to publish another book next year which tells you a few more secrets regarding the occult background behind the so-called Monster of Florence.
Uh-huh.
They found in the end a guy called Pacciani, and they kind of involved him and another guy, but this guy basically was brought in front of the public arena, and he was a simple guy. He couldn't have done this thing of cutting meticulously the intimate parts like a surgeon. He was simply a guy who was to be a cover-up for very powerful people. And in the years that followed the murders, Pacciani, of course, was then arrested, and with other guy called Vanni, put, you know, under public scrutiny. But then, in the end, these people died. You know, they might be, you know, they died because they were old. They died because they might be killed. But they died. And then what you have now? You have certain new investigations on the Monster of Florence that brought up the fact that there was a lodge involved, a regular lodge, so not even some kind of a regular lodge of, I think, the Grand Orient of Italy, near Perugia, involved with certain names of certain people. And of course I went and researched the whole subject because I myself am very close to the Grand Hierophant in Perugia, Giancarlo Seri, and I was the only one to do a documentary, to film actually a documentary for Enigma TV in their temple. So a few years back that was also made as an official video for their rite. So I mean, I collaborated with the people in Perugia, and I know this city for many years because it's very important. The whole region of Umbria is one probably the most powerful regions when it comes to Freemasonry. The links to the occult of the Umbria region are second to none. Wow. Some say that actually maybe there is more Satanism in Umbria than in Turin. Turin Satanism is a bit of a myth. It was created because at the end of the 60s, some Freemasons went to Anton LaVey. They asked him to charter some kind of satanic grotto in Turin. They charted this grotto, but after a couple of years, these Freemasons saw that Anton LaVey's form of Satanism was a bit too Hollywood style, a bit too American style. It was a little bit scratching the surface. They wanted to do something really dark. So what they did, they went to France, and apparently they got initiated there in the darkest satanic cult and brought it back to Turin. And at that point, they started with animal sacrifices, human sacrifices, blah, blah, blah. And they built up really the reputation of Turin as the occult capital of Italy. Of course, there is an Egyptian museum, but and there is a very powerful Masonic lobby in Turin, because Turin was, as you know, the capital, the first capital of Italy. But the actual Satanism phenomena is, if I tell you the Satanic City of Italy, like I write in my new book, which you have, and there is a whole chapter about it, is Florence. Florence is the real Satanic city of Italy. And Umbria was part of a greater Tuscany. until the unification of Italy. So what happened in very important saint, and where you find very holy places like Assisi or very holy places for Christianity, you will always find Satanism next door. It's a tradition. It's something which is written even in the Don Quixote. You know, it says in the Don Quixote, you know, wherever you will find a congregation of Christians, then you have a bigger congregation of Satanists next door. I mean, it's something that happens for hundreds of years. And apparently in the region of Umbria, there is some of the most ancient satanic families that do rituals that are, I mean, terrible rituals. Of course, black magic, sacrifice, human sacrifice, and this monster of Florence was part of all this.
Wow.
So I gave you a little bit of a perspective. Wow. Going back to Hollywood.
Yes, what about Satanism in Hollywood?
Yeah, no, I would like to say a few things. Now, this Lost Boy movie saw the participation of this guy called Corey Haim, who eventually died. If we went and investigated probably behind the death of Corey Haim, we will find a lot about contemporary Satanism in Hollywood. What is contemporary Satanism in Hollywood and when it's born? Now, I talked, as you remember, the other day when I went on InfoWars about this creation of this early film director, Griffith. It's not Griffin, eh? Don't go. Griffith. He was a Freemason. His best friend was Charlie Chaplin. And they both were into little girls. I mean, little girls got in trouble, Charlie Chaplin. He might be, you know, venerated as this comedian of all time, but he was a pervert. He was a complete pervert, and he was a complete pedophile. And at that time in Hollywood, that was the specific time frame between the 20s and 30s, in which, of course, you have the little children actors and stuff going around, but we should focus also on the birth of this Gnostic Thelemic current within Hollywood, because it was there with people like Wilfred Smith, like people from the OTO that participated in the first Gnostic extravaganza, Gnostic Mass with the Naked Lady on the altar in Winona Boulevard, which is off Hollywood Boulevard. So the Ordo Templi Orientis started really in Hollywood. Then Parsons, the Jack Parsons, of course, you know the whole story with Scientology, Hubbard. This is quite known that there is this link. But people forget that after he brought the whole thing to Pasadena, but before bringing it to Pasadena, let's say the early stages of the Agape Lodge were in Hollywood. And a lot of people involved in these early stages, even in the fact just as spectators for the public Gnostic Mass. Because one thing to promote the OTO that Crowley was very interested to do in Hollywood was to set up a very Hollywood-style Gnostic Mass, you know, to glorify his ego, glorify, of course, the work he was doing as prophet of the New Age. And that happened in front of everybody when they had this first Gnostic Mass, and there was a lot of big, let's say, Hollywood heavyweights that were there as spectators. And there were people who participated not only to orgies and pedophilia, but even to cannibalism.
What?
I mean,
Right.
yeah, I mean, now we are talking about pedophilia in Hollywood, but people forget that 100 years ago, the scandals in Hollywood were even worse than the ones we have now.
Oh, my God.
And the early scandals in Hollywood...
apparently we have just begun to scratch the surface of.
Yeah, I mean, when you have a lot of money, you are a pervert, and you can do what you want. The next stage of perversion after pedophilia is cannibalism. Now, I would invite people to go and check out a video which is available, which was shot not so long ago, of Marina Abramović.
Right.
She made a cannibalistic dinner for all her Hollywood friends. And you can find it on the internet. It's still there. I checked out a couple of hours ago. You put the name Cannibalism, Marina Abramović, and you're going to get the video. And basically what she did was this. She put these bodies on top of tables. These are, of course, fake bodies made of something that is, we hope, food, normal food, or we even hope it's vegetarian, but we don't know. Probably it's meat of some kind. We don't know what kind of meat. But it was crafted by Marina Abramovic in a way that it resembles an actual body. Mm-hmm. Now, these famous Hollywood people, I'm talking about really famous Hollywood people, you can see it on the video, mm-hmm. are queuing up to eat from and grab pieces of the body, and even pieces, and of course the heads are chopped and put on top of the table. But it's not like they really resemble a human being. It's disgusting.
Right.
Well, wasn't it Katy Perry? Have you seen that particular video where she is treated literally like a piece of meat? She is. She's brought in out of a truck. She's unwrapped out of freezer paper. She's dredged in flour. She's pounded and tenderized and sprinkled with spices and thrown in a stew with vegetables. I mean, again, you can find this video pretty easily. And it's, ritualized cannibalism being presented as, oh, this is cute because it's just meant in a sexual sense and not in... But now what you're telling me is that it actually can be just an allegory.
Well, an allegory of course, much more darkest rituals that, of course, are not filmed. It's like the Hollywood star who wants to eat a piece of crocodile or a piece of a rare species of snake or a rare species of animal that, of course, is forbidden, but he wants to have it. So he's going to pay any kind of money. He's going to pay $100,000 for having that dinner with that kind of animal, that kind of fish. So Hollywood stars are really sick in their head. So, I mean, I suggested when we end up this interview, maybe you can go and pick up this video on the internet and maybe put it together with the work we are doing today so that people see how disgusting these people are, because it's really incredible to see what they do. And at the same time, I would also like to thank you for the work that you have done there. Of course, in the mix of chaos, you were there on Hollywood, on the Walk of Fame. I've been there myself. But the thing that astonished me more was the presence of these Anunnaki, Enki, Nijro, however it's called. Both of them there, holding their own symbols. The symbol of Enki is the symbol of the sea, of the semen, of the god. So we are talking here about a temple, which is in all aspects a functioning temple, which absorbs energy every day.
And it's right next door to the what was the Kodak Theater, now the Dolby Theater, where the Oscars are given out every year. It's just right there, disguised as a shopping mall.
Disguised, and then on the other side of the street, what do you have? The ex-Masonic temple. It's even written still. So, I mean, it's not that. Like, the thing is this, 100 years ago, I think that probably the most wild thing you could find was probably a Masonic lodge. Then you had the Crowley bringing the OTO through his representatives in California, and that became also a trend. Then you had Scientology. Then you had all the gurus. Then you had, of course, all the kind of extravagances. But nowadays, as I said earlier, they're going back to their first love, which is Aleister Crowley. Of course, they will always neglect the fact that Crowley is so evil, but we have to also view Crowley as somebody who has kick-started modern Satanism, because from Crowley, then you have Anton LaVey, who was there amongst people in Berkeley who was practicing Crowleyanity and Thelema, and he was himself part of an OTO lodge before forming the Church of Satan. Then we have the next stage of the evolution, which is in all this, Michael Aquino. And Michael Aquino is... as you know, I mean, you have basically...
CIA, all kinds of things involved in that. Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, I see you are quite acquainted with Egyptian magic, so I don't need to tell you what Set is. So the magic of Aquino is very powerful, but also very intellectual and probably a little bit too complex for certain people. So the next stage then of this Satanic evolution is this modern kind of Satanism represented by the Satanic Temple, by Lucian Greaves, by somebody who is basically promoting Satanism like he's promoting another religion. I mean, they have to be accepted. They don't want the people to treat them bad. They defend minorities like them. I mean, the Satanic Temple went on defending not only the Democrats, but also defending Islam, openly defending Islamic minority. So, I mean, the Satanic Temple today, what does it represent? It represents the final stage before the complete and utter acceptance of a religion, which wants at that point to be treated just like everybody else. What does this mean for all of us who are viewing this video, for your people who maybe practice ritual magic and ceremonial magic? What does it mean? Well, it means a very dangerous situation, because you can be very easily exchanged for a Satanist. I mean, Leslie was there asking those people, what do you think these two women were doing? Of course, they were actually doing satanic ritual, and probably everybody was actually saying the right thing. Yes. But I think that it's very easy to be then, exchanged for a Satan. You have to be very careful to distinguish yourself and place yourself in a completely different light. Right. So I hope that you understand you are in a very difficult position yourself.
Of course.
One of the ways that we avoid that is with complete transparency. Just the ritual that it was actually a spell that we did more than a ritual.
Right, you've seen the footage from our last episode.
Right, a subtle difference between a ritual and a spell.
Right.
But most people looking at what we did, they don't get a sense of discomfort or foreboding because they're familiar with what they're looking at. They're looking at a guy in a suit and a woman in a dress, some bolt cutters and some chain, and she's talking about freeing people. Everything makes sense. They don't have to suspend disbelief about anything. You don't have to even believe that magic works. You can just see what I'm doing as an interesting piece of street theater. But it's not scary because all the symbols that we're using are known. And that's where we take our comfort and our strength, is that we use known symbols that the general public agrees upon.
Mm-hmm. And you can also feel just the difference of energy and the difference of intention. What surprised me, I think, the most was, we went to Hollywood in order to perform our ritual that we do every month with the new moon. We usually do it here. In order to protect the Republic and protect the president and to protect the American voters who voted for him because of this group of witches and Satanists that every month are attacking the president and attacking the Republic and attacking those who have bet Trump, the American voters. And so we've been working very hard to do that. And suddenly we find these people that are there at the Trump Star every month and make themselves known to us, synchronizing their rituals with ours. And we wanted to know who they are. They invited us down. We went to investigate, wondering at the same time we were there if we couldn't do some sort of investigation of Hollywood Satanism, because the whole thing was very actual with everything that was happening in the news with the Weinstein and all of that. And what was amazing is we didn't have to look far at all. We didn't have to look any farther than the people who showed up for the people who had invited us down there. And you saw the ritual yourself. Yeah. It's clearly satanic.
Yeah, you told me a few days before that you were going there, and there was a guy, a certain purple guy, who invited you there. And strangely enough, oddly enough, we both discussed the fact that it was a little bit weird, to say the least, to find somebody who claimed to be a Trump supporter, a libertarian, and at the same time he was a member of the Ordo Templi Orientis. Now, I found it a little bit strange that was really going on, and I found it a bit odd that he could support you in any way.
Aleister Crowley is the greatest traitor that the Golden Dawn has ever known. Aleister Crowley was sent by British intelligence to destroy the Golden Dawn. Right?
The Golden Dawn was supposed to be destroyed mainly because it was a Jacobite supporter kind of a group of people for them that were Hanoverians. And of course, the British intelligence is in the hand of the Queen, and nobody can touch the Queen. So the Golden Dawn, being too close to France, to certain elements, they kind of sent Crowley on a mission also that was political. So you're completely right about that. And it's been actually, this hypothesis has been confirmed by various authors who have published some very serious books on the topic, people who are historians of espionage and of intelligence community, which I will address you later on. There is a couple of books that definitely you have, apart from the Tobias Shelton book, which is also very interesting. There's another one called Crowley Agent 666. I think I have it here behind somewhere, which you should definitely check out on this topic. So you're completely right there. Crowley was infiltrating the Golden Dawn to sabotage it. He did it magically, like I said, because they sent a magician to destroy a magical order. They didn't send a politician, because if they sent somebody who wasn't acquainted with those forces, he would have never been able to create what Crowley created, the chaos Crowley created. I mean, the chaos Crowley created, as you know, pushed the eminent members in the Golden Dawn were all upset by what Crowley did.
Right. By his presence, by his mere presence.
By his mere presence, but also he was very close to Matters. Matters didn't really understand immediately that he was mentoring a beast. I mean, he was giving this guy the ammunition to create everything he created later on. I mean, immediately after the Golden Dawn experience, he creates the AA. Later on, he takes over the OTO. Let's also remember those people.
Let's not forget, published all of the Golden Dawn rituals and materials in the Equinox. That was the first major treachery.
Major betrayal of his oaths. And so,
which is why he ended up as a heroin addict, by the way. Those are very serious.
Of course. I mean, there is a story that says that Crowley once went to Gurdjieff. As you know, Gurdjieff was a great initiate, and a real initiate. My family in particular was very much connected with my Russian part of the family with Gurdjieff through Nikolai Rabenek, who worked with both Gurdjieff and Ouspensky. Now, even my great-grandmother was in Fontainebleau at one point.
The former premonstrator of the Hathor Temple in Paris, Nicholas Terashenko, Marquis Terashenko, was also a student of Mr. Gurdjieff.
Well, we just heard that interview with that dude about OTO and its tradition reaching back to medieval times with the Knights Templar up to modern times with Ordo Templar Orientis and Aleister Crowley, who is a top figurehead for the way people understand the occult today, in the different branches of it. It's this very diverse body of ideas and societies and relationships and influences and cultures. But ultimately we end up with Satanism. But in order to really understand what the point is behind Satanism, Luciferianism, and the occult, is to understand it as a mockery of what specifically the Christian religion is. That it's the Christian religion that alone takes these forms of ritual in order to communicate a spiritual idea, an ideal about who we are and the nature of reality. And the occult world looks at those things with mocking abuse, to say that those forms are meaningless outside of our passion to control and dominate. And ultimately that's what religions are. And so then they prove that by founding this seemingly legitimate religion in order to control things the way that they want them to have a secular society built on the ideals of utopianism and a statist elite who rule over the peasant masses and do with them as they will, including sacrifice them ritually for their own power on an individual or a mass scale. But it's exactly the same in a lot of ways as the thing that they are coming against. And isn't that always the way that you tend to be the thing that you hate the most? You know, you accuse others for their religious spirit and your disdain for them, for their, you know, seemingly naive and ignorant sheep who go along with just being controlled by some priestly class, only to yourself and your jealousy become the priestly class that you say that you hate, in order to maintain some semblance of control, and then create the same problem that you say that you're against. And that's ultimately the issue with Satanism. Why it's bad, why it's wrong, why it's why it's a problem, is because it's of its self-destructive nature. That it doesn't seek to find the best absolute that is the highest energy on the highest scale, right? It's the lowest energy at the lowest scale. Defeatism. We're all just slaves to our impulses. We're all just slaves to our instincts, and have no real will. We will say do what thou wilt, but that is all chemically engineered, ultimately from the nuances of the chaotic universe that we emerge out of and into. And that is exactly incongruous with the Christian gospel, which says that all of reality is formed from a mind that makes sense, that conquers over chaos, that eliminates chaos by providing form and structure, and does so according to a divine nature, an eternal reality that is irrefutable and immutable. And people really have to start now. The only way you're going to be able to recognize it in its effect in reality is understand it for what it really is, and that's for being the atheist agenda that it really is. It doesn't believe in any Satan. You know, we got to stop thinking about it in terms of like, oh, it's just going to show itself like in a red hat, you know, and a tail and a pitchfork, you know. But that's why. It's so easy to dismiss out of hand Oprah, because you're not looking for Oprah, right? You're like that big, beautiful black woman, who's just always got a big smile on her face, always wants to talk about, love, no. It's like, no, it's going to be amorphous. You're not going to see Satan behind her, because of the imagery of it, and that's how they manipulate. That's the magic, right? That's the illusion of like, oh, isn't she just lovely? Never mind the fact that she hung out with Henry Weinstein and basically is documented pimping out girls to him. It's not. The reason why they get away with it is because this is the way that they're able to hide things in plain sight, and then because they control the media and the message, the information gateways, in order to set the standard for what is like, common agreement, social agreement, understanding about what is and what is normal. What are the right questions? What are the wrong questions? Because they don't just have the media, they don't just have entertainment, they don't just have sports, they don't just have politics, but they've got religion too. They're in your churches. They are your pastors, and it's really hard because not everybody. This doesn't apply to everybody. I mean, I grew up in an environment where I had the great fortune of being taught and discipled and cared for by some really spectacular people, and I learned a lot of things, and I in no way would ever suspect them of being as deviant as that, So I mean, I'm not likely to suspect anybody that I was raised with. But that's not to say that they're not out there. You can hear testimonies of it all the time. You know, so is it so far? So you know, like the questions they're not letting you ask should tell you about who exactly is controlled. Because why aren't you allowed to question the established quo? Why aren't you allowed to question the experts? Why aren't you allowed to accuse socialism of being a problem? Why aren't you allowed to point to the government and say that the government might be the issue? You know, why aren't you allowed to question, you know, the intelligence operatives and intelligence apparatus in these international organizations? Why aren't you allowed to consider a global option in terms of where that there might be an invisible power structure that operates on a global scale, that has been doing so for more than 100 years? Why aren't you allowed to consider the possibility that not everything is as it seems, and that deceptive people are really going to generate the most outlandish deceptions in order to keep the truth hidden from the right people? Why aren't you allowed to consider that if you know your enemy isn't going to tell you what they're going to do, you know, isn't going to tell you what they're doing behind closed doors? You know, why aren't you allowed to do those things? That's because that is who's in power. The people that you are, you're, as an American and as a child of God, have the duty and the commission to, you know, root out of your congregations, to root out of your societies deceivers. You know, they end up at the highest levels, and then they put you in chains, and then by then it's too late. They cook the books, you know, they unleash a pandemic upon you and your people, and then they want to point you to a flag, or they want you to point you to a single person. And but the truth is, it's not about the people, it's not about the face, it's about the spiritual energies, it's about the powers and principalities.